Close your eyes. For a moment, you're walking through the narrow streets of Florence. It's the 1470s. The first light of dawn spills across the cobblestones, and from the window of a small house, stacks of sketch papers flutter in the breeze. Carrying with them the scent of fresh ink, inside a young man holds a quill. Studying the delicate curve of a bird's wing, flying, he whispers to himself, it must be something a human can do as well. That young man is Leonardo da Vinci. He hasn't yet painted the Mona Lisa, nor the Last Supper. The world doesn't know his name. Not yet, but within him there's something different. An endless, burning curiosity. One day, he writes in his notebook, if you wish to understand the flight of birds, first you must study the wind. For Leonardo, life was never about simply living. It was about observing, understanding and questioning. When he looked at nature, he didn't see it as others did, in the veins of a leaf. He saw the flow of water, in the movement of rivers. He recognized the pulse of life, in the play of shadow across a human face. He saw the geometry of the cosmos. That is why his life was not only about art, but also anatomy, astronomy, architecture, engineering, music, and philosophy. To understand Leonardo da Vinci is not just to understand an artist. It is to try to understand a mind that sought to understand the world itself. So, how did Leonardo become one of the most fascinating figures in human history? How did one man become at once a painter, an inventor, an anatomist, a musician, a philosopher, and a visionary? The answer lies in his way of living, a philosophy that can be expressed through 7 principles. Each one reveals how Leonardo saw the world. Each one still invites us, even today, to rediscover our own potential. Let's begin with the first, perhaps the root of all the others, curiosity. For Leonardo, curiosity was not just a feeling, it was a way of being. He woke each morning with a new question in his mind. Why is the sky blue? Which muscles move when a bird flaps its wings? Why does water swirl? He didn't turn to books for answers. He turned to nature. That was rare in his time. During the Renaissance, knowledge belonged to authority. What the masters said was considered truth, but Leonardo believed something radical. The only source of truth is observation. There's a story that one of his earliest notebooks contained only questions, page after page of them, no answers, just wonder and maybe. That was his greatest lesson. It wasn't about finding answers, but about never stopping the search. For Leonardo, to know didn't mean to memorize, it meant to see. When he watched a water mill, he didn't just see force, he saw rhythm, direction, energy. Then he turned that observation into invention. He didn't copy nature, he learned from it. Perhaps that was his true genius. He never lost his childlike curiosity. As people grow older, they stop asking. They assume they know, but Leonardo never stopped wondering. Everything, for him, became a question, a how and a why. In one of his notes, he wrote, "The mind that is not fed by curiosity becomes a barren field," and maybe that is Leonardo's first lesson to us today. No matter how much we think we know, we must never forget to keep wondering, because curiosity is where all knowledge begins, and Leonardo's journey began exactly there. While working one day in a workshop in Milan, one of Leonardo's students asked him, "Master, why do you always experiment? Aren't the things written in books already true?" Leonardo stayed silent for a while, then looked up and smiled. "If you only believe what's written in books, you see through others' eyes. But if you try it yourself, you see with your own." That sentence sums up his entire life. In Leonardo's world, knowledge wasn't something to be memorized. It was something to be touched, tested, and experienced through mistakes. In his time, science mostly meant following ancient Greek texts. Whatever Aristotle said was taken as absolute truth. But Leonardo questioned everything. If he wanted to understand how water flowed, he built miniature river systems. If he wanted to see how muscles worked, he studied human corpses. It's said that at night he secretly worked in church basements, dissecting bodies to study each muscle one by one. That might sound disturbing today, But his goal was simple, to see truth as it is, because to Leonardo, nature never lied, only humans did, when they failed to understand it. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Experience is the mother of all knowledge." This experimental mindset made him not only a revolutionary artist, but also one of the first true scientists. Take his anatomical drawings. For example, the muscle systems, veins and heart structures still shown in medical schools. Today, these were made in the 1500s. He was among the first to discover that the human heart has 4 chambers. But none of these discoveries were accidents. Each one came from a place where curiosity met. Experimentation. Leonardo didn't just wonder, he tested his wonder when he became obsessed. With the idea of flight, he watched birds, measured the wind, drew wings, built small prototypes, and failed, but he didn't stop. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "If birds can fly, then I can too. I just don't know how yet, but I will." That isn't the voice of a scientist. It's the voice of a believer, someone unafraid to fail, unashamed to try again. In his era, failure was seen as a disgrace, but for Leonardo, every failure was just data. Every wrong attempt was a step toward truth, and that's the essence of his second principle. Dimostrazione, learning through experience. It reminds us that knowledge isn't real until it's lived. You can read as much as you want, but you'll never truly understand something until you do it, just like you can't learn to play an instrument from books alone. Leonardo learned the world by playing it, one observation at a time. That's why he wasn't just a thinker, he was a doer. One morning, he told his students in the Milan workshop, "It's easy to defend a theory. It takes time to prove it, and time loves the truth." Today, we crave fast results, instant mastery, instant knowledge. But Leonardo's message was different. Observe, experiment, be patient, because truth doesn't rush for anyone. He filled his notebooks not in haste, but in devotion, with drawings, formulas, reflections that outlived centuries, and perhaps that's why, even now, his words whisper a timeless wisdom. Only what you've tested is truly yours. In Renaissance Italy, everything was supposed to have an answer. Religion explained science. Science explained nature. Everything had to be orderly, measurable, and understandable. But Leonardo was different. He loved the unknown. The word sfumato in Italian means like smoke, soft or blurred. In painting, it describes the gentle transitions between tones, that delicate blending where shadow melts into light. Think of the Mona Lisa's mysterious smile. That's sfumato turned into art. One moment she seems to smile, the next there's a trace of sadness on her face, neither happy nor sorrowful, neither near nor distant. That in between, that grey zone, is Leonardo's very soul. Leonardo understood that uncertainty is part of human nature. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Uncertainty is not to be feared. It is the dark garden of the mind, where new ideas take root." He never believed in a single, absolute truth. Even while defending an idea, he would simultaneously think of its opposite, because he knew that to see the whole, one must understand both the light and the shadow. For Leonardo, if an artist, a thinker, or an inventor claimed to know everything, it meant they had stopped truly seeing, because certainty is the death of curiosity. One evening, as the sun was setting, he wrote, "The setting. Sun is not an end. It only shows the direction of a new light." He never bound himself blindly to any idea. He neither denied God nor worshipped science. He walked the misty line between them, and perhaps that's why the Mona Lisa's smile still captivates us centuries later, because that smile exists between emotions, far from certainty. Deep within the complexity of being human, Leonardo portrayed humanity in all its shades, uncertain, complex, passionate, fearful, wise, and naive, all at once. He didn't reject good or evil. He simply tried to understand them. Another day, he wrote, Those who fear the dark will never see the light. Yet we, the modern people, crave clarity. We want everything explained, instantly, simply, neatly. We feel uneasy when we can't name a feeling, and anxious when we can't calculate an outcome. But Leonardo reminds us the world is not an equation to be solved. It is a miracle to be observed. To him, a painter's brushstroke mattered as much as the length of a shadow. Even the way leaves turned in the wind revealed life's unpredictable rhythm. Leonardo listened to that rhythm, and he taught us. Not everything in life has to be clear. Sometimes the answers are hidden in the fog. There's a story. One day, his student asked why the Mona Lisa was taking so long to finish. Leonardo smiled and said, "Because I still don't know what she feels." That single line captures his entire worldview. He didn't run from what he couldn't understand. He lived within it. He observed, questioned, and embraced mystery. And maybe that's why the Mona Lisa's expression remains unsolved to this day, because Leonardo mastered the art of not resolving. Today, we can think of sfumato not just as a painting technique, but as a philosophy of life, to live peacefully with uncertainty, to stop naming every emotion, to exist without having every answer. Leonardo's third principle reminds us the most beautiful parts of life are not clear, like a sunset, a smile, or the beating of a heart. Sfumato teaches us that sometimes clarity is less important than depth, and Leonardo chose depth. He mastered not in the brightness of knowledge, but in the shadow of mystery. For Leonardo da Vinci, there were two worlds, one of emotion and one of reason, but he never saw them as enemies, rather as two siblings meant to complete one another. In one hand, he held a brush, in the other, a ruler. On one side, the artist gazing at the sky. On the other, the engineer solving equations. And Leonardo brought those two voices into harmony. One day, he told his students, "Science without soul remains dry. Art without knowledge fades away." To him, art was emotion taking form. Science was the effort to understand that emotion. One was born from the heart, the other from the mind, but both reached for the same truth, to understand nature. Days in Florence, the mathematics of the eye. As a young apprentice in Florence, Leonardo studied perspective with his masters, but unlike the others, he didn't see it as just a drawing technique. For him, perspective was a language, a way to understand the world. To know how you see an object was, in fact, to understand how your mind works. At that time, Leonardo began developing a deep fascination with mathematics. He studied the angle of light in a painting, the proportions of a human face, the spirals hidden in shells and plants. Even in the curve of a leaf, he sensed a kind of mathematical music. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Beauty is the geometry of nature." What he meant was this: art is not only the aesthetics of feeling, it is also the logic of nature. The balance in a portrait, the proportions of a face, the posture of a figure, all follow the same laws as nature's design. But those laws aren't memorized, they are felt. The anatomy of thought. Leonardo didn't just study the human body, he tried to dissect thought itself. Even when choosing colors, he thought like a scientist. He examined the psychology of color, the refraction of light, the density of shadows. But beyond all of that, what truly fascinated him was perception. In one notebook, he wrote, "The eye is the window of the soul, but no two eyes ever see the same landscape." That's why two people could look at the same view and feel something completely different. Leonardo wanted to understand why the link between sensation and knowledge. In doing so, he asked some of the first questions of modern psychology. Why do we find certain things beautiful? Why does one face calm us? Why does a single line please the eye? The answer, he believed, was both artistic and scientific. For humans perceive not only with their eyes, but also with their hearts. The engineer's soul. Leonardo's notebooks are filled with hundreds of machine sketches. flying contraptions, bridges, water pumps, even diving suits. But among them, one thing stands out: every invention possesses a kind of elegance. His machines were not only functional, they were beautiful. Because to Leonardo, function and beauty were one and the same. If something is useful, he said, it is beautiful, just like in nature. A bird's wing is both graceful and strong. A flower's form is delicate yet mathematically perfect. Nature wastes nothing, and neither did Leonardo. The universe is one whole to Leonardo. The universe was a single living system. The flow of water in a river was no different from the flow of blood in the human heart. A falling stone and a moving star obeyed the same laws. He wrote, "The universe is a body. Everything is connected." This sense of unity infused all his work, scientific and artistic alike. In The Last Supper, for instance, the vanishing point of perspective aligns perfectly with the head of Christ. Leonardo didn't design it only as a religious scene, but as a metaphor for cosmic order, a perfect balance of symmetry, proportion, and emotion. He brought together the inner world of man and the vast laws of the cosmos on the same canvas. That's why, when you look at his art, you don't just see a painting, you see a way of thinking. The call for balance and harmony. Leonardo's fourth principle tells us this: a person cannot walk through life guided only by logic or only by feeling. True wisdom is born where emotion and intellect, intuition and reason meet. Today, we often live at one extreme or the other, either too rational or entirely emotional. But Leonardo's message is simple: feel with your mind, think with your heart. That meeting point between art and science is the very center of human potential, where mathematics and music coexist, where calculation meets imagination. Perhaps Leonardo's timelessness comes from his ability to reconcile those two worlds, to give both space without sacrificing either, like the balance of a perfect scale. His principle still echoes today. When you design a bridge, don't just study the steel, understand the flow of water. When you compose music, listen not only to the notes, but to the silence between them. When you build a life, follow not only the plan, but also your feelings, because only when both sides of a person are in harmony can we be whole. Arte, scienza, the union of art and science. For Leonardo da Vinci, art and science were never two separate worlds. To him, beauty was a formula, and a formula, a form of beauty. He walked through life with a brush in one hand and a compass in the other. During the Renaissance, people were divided. Artists interpreted the world through imagination, while scientists explained it with numbers and measurement. But Leonardo refused this division. One day he wrote in his notebook, "Art is the sister of science. One speaks to the soul, the other to the mind. Yet both are limbs of the same body." When Leonardo painted, he wasn't just thinking about colors. He calculated the physical nature of light, how the retina responded to it, and the exact angle of every shadow. For him, a painting was a laboratory. Every brushstroke was an experiment, a solution to a problem. His fascination with nature drove him to see like a microscope, long before microscopes existed. When he studied a bird's wing, he drew every fiber of muscle because he wanted to understand the poetry of flight, not only emotionally, but mechanically. To truly understand a bird, it is not enough to watch it. You must know its muscles, its bones, its dance with the wind. That is why his dream of a flying machine was born not from fantasy, but from nature itself. He believed humans could fly, if only they learned not to imitate nature, but to understand it. Even today, while artists speak of muses, Leonardo would reach for a compass and draw perfect ratios. Before starting a painting, he calculated the refraction of light. Before sculpting, he sketched the anatomy of muscles. Because for him, art without science is blind. Science without art is barren. That sentence captures the essence of his philosophy, neither pure calculation nor pure emotion, but the harmonious dance of both. Imagine this, you're looking at a painting. The colors merge, the figure's eyes follow you. But the person who painted it not only held a brush, he understood the optical system behind that gaze. That is Leonardo. He fused the aesthetics of art with the skeleton of science. In one of his notebooks he wrote, "The eye is the window to the human soul, but one must also know how the glass of that window is made." That's why Leonardo believed artists should be as observant as scientists. An artist must understand what they see, and a scientist must see what they understand. There's a famous story. While dissecting a cadaver in Florence with his students, Leonardo studied the structure of the arm. When one student said, "Master, this is too much detail. This isn't art," Leonardo paused and replied, "If I do not know how this muscle moves, how can I paint the grace of a hand?" That sentence is the heart of arte ging scienza. He didn't just imitate nature, he understood its intelligence. In many ways, Leonardo was the first synthetic thinker of the modern age. He loved connecting fragments, engineering within a painting, elegance within a machine, beauty within anatomy. Even today, art and science seem far apart. But Leonardo reminds us true knowledge lives in both the mind and the heart. Perhaps that's why he remains the most complete human of the Renaissance, because he could speak two languages at once, the language of numbers and the language of poetry. In Leonardo's world, a formula becomes emotion, a line becomes a principle, a shadow becomes an experiment. Everything is interconnected. He saw the universe like this. Everything is connected. Water, wind, earth, the human heart, all are notes of the same mathematics. That is the marriage of art and science, a harmony, a wholeness. And perhaps that's why his notebooks still fascinate us. On one page, the precision of an engineer. On the next, the tenderness of an artist. A sketch of flying machines beside the face of a newborn child. A geometric study next to the words, "Love is the greatest force." That is where Leonardo's magic lies. He didn't just want to know how the world works. He wanted to know why it is beautiful. Corporalità, the mastery of the body. For Leonardo da Vinci, no matter how sharp the mind was, if the body could not keep up, the human being was incomplete. He believed that knowledge should reside not only in the mind, but also in the body. In one of his notebooks he wrote, "The mind learns, but the body remembers." Leonardo saw the human body not merely as a subject of anatomy, but as a map of perfection. The arrangement of muscles, the proportions of bones, the rhythm of the heart, the flow of breath, all of these were part of nature's balance. That is why he strove to be someone who trained his body, not just carried it. He would rise before dawn, walk, swim, lift heavy stones to strengthen his hands, stretch his finger muscles. For a painter, the hand was not merely a tool, it was the continuation of the soul. During the Renaissance, working with the body was considered the craft of laborers. But Leonardo reversed this notion. For him, physical mastery was also an intellectual virtue. "The hands think," he said. "When building something, the silent part of the brain works." This is why he could be simultaneously an engineer, sculptor, painter, and inventor. He had made his body an extension of his mind. There is a story. As a young apprentice in Florence, Leonardo was painting in Verrocchio's workshop when his master scolded him. "An artist's hand must not tremble, Leonardo. You cannot train your mind without training your hand." From that day on, Leonardo immersed his hands in water every morning, pressed them against stones, drew lines, exercised his muscles. Years later, when he executed the delicate transitions of Mona Lisa's lips, the steadiness of his hand was perhaps the legacy of those mornings. But corporalità was not just about physical strength, it was also about grace. Leonardo did not confuse power with brute force. True strength, he believed, comes from balance. In a notebook he noted, no matter how strong a body is, if it is unbalanced, it is a mindless giant. This is why he studied the aesthetics of movement. He observed the steps of walking people, calculated the turns of dancers, and even learned from the ways animals moved. In nature, no motion is wasted. Every step carries a rhythm. Leonardo sought to discover this rhythm, the subtle link that unites the mathematics of human motion with elegance. He didn't just study the body, he analyzed it. He drew how muscles connected, which movements activated which fibers. One day, while sketching the muscular system of a human arm, he wrote beside it, "This muscle serves thought." Isn't that a beautiful sentence? The muscle serves thought. The body is an extension of the mind, and simultaneously its complement. For Leonardo, corporality was not merely about health or aesthetics. It was the art of developing oneself as a whole. A painter must train their eye as much as their hand. A thinker must learn not only through books, but also through the body. Today, we call this bodily intelligence. Leonardo grasped it 5 centuries ago. As a person knows their body, they know the world, he said. No matter how much theory you know, pulling the bow correctly is learned only by the body. Muscles, fingers, posture. At first it feels like a mental effort, but over time the body memorizes the language of music. This is exactly what Leonardo teaches. Think with the body, understand with the body, feel with the body. One day, a student asked him, "Master, why do you study everything in such detail? Who notices such tiny differences?" Leonardo smiled and replied, "God is in the details." From that day, his students knew that Leonardo approached even a single muscle fiber, a finger's motion, or the rhythm of a breath with sacred attention. Corporality teaches us, knowledge is not carried only in the mind. It expresses itself in our walk, our posture, in every movement we make. Thus, Leonardo's 5th principle is the most physical yet deepest connection a person can have, the harmonious dance between mind and body. 6th principle, connessione, the interconnection of everything. Leonardo da Vinci saw the world as a whole, made of interconnected parts. The branches of a tree, the flow of water, the rhythm of the human heart, the flap of a bird's wing. All were connected to each other. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Every part of the universe speaks to the other, silently, but inevitably." He didn't just notice similarities in nature, he sought to understand the invisible links between things. He would examine the curve of a river, then draw blood vessels, the arches of bridges, or even muscle structures with the same perspective. All were echoes of the same order. Connessione was not only a physical principle, but also a conceptual one. One idea nourishes another. One observation guides the next. In Leonardo's notebooks, machine sketches, anatomical studies, nature observations, and even poetic notes touch each other across the pages. Everything is interconnected. One day he told a student, "You cannot see anything in isolation. If you do not see the connection of all things, you cannot understand the truth." This is why Leonardo's approach was holistic. He examined a disease not merely as a part of the body, but in the balance of the entire organism. He studied a machine not just as the sum of its parts, but as part of the whole system. And he saw a painting not merely in brushstrokes, but in the combination of light, shadow, perspective, and emotion. Connessione teaches us nothing exists alone. Every event, every object, every person is part of a network. Leonardo's vision of the universe is timeless. Every drawing, every notebook, every note is connected. Every part is used to understand the whole. This principle resonates today in ecology, systems, science, and complex thinking. For example, Leonardo studied the movement of water and observed the same principles in wind, waves, and even human blood circulation. Everything is the same rule manifested in different forms. To see this unity, He combined curiosity, experimentation, the ability to embrace uncertainty, and both artistic and scientific perspectives. Connessione reminds us to see life holistically. Knowing only one field is not enough. The world is made of relationships, flows and connections. And Leonardo's journey was about discovering these connections.